All right, it's the start of another work week. It's a Tuesday. Feels like a Monday. Always feels like that after a long weekend. But I hope you had a great long weekend. The weather certainly was not very good. Cold and damp. And that's what it was all weekend long, which is okay. At least we had the time off. And people had all kinds of time to sit inside and whine and complain about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know for non-sports fans out there, it must seem bizarre to look at this and say, "What is your problem, everybody?" Like, get serious. This is sports. This is a kids' game. These are multi-millionaires playing a kids' game, and you are losing your mind over this. I can't defend it. I really can't defend it. It's silly. It really is. That said, what is it about sports? And I would say that every single fanatical sports fan became one in childhood. That's where it all started. Was you as a child. In some cases, just barely out of infancy. And you probably adopted it by usually your family, your dad or your mom, or friends or whatever. And it's a kid's game, folks. That's all it is when all is said and done. That said, look, I get it that people are invested in it. And it was a massive collapse. Like, I don't know how much people want to talk about this anymore. We'll open the phone lines in about an hour's time. And if any of you want to continue to do a postmortem on this, then you're certainly welcome to do so. And look, I watched it, and did I lose any sleep over it? Absolutely not. Would I have 20 years ago? Yeah, I would have. But I get it that some people are incredibly passionate about sports, but it goes beyond that. It goes into something that perhaps is a little unhealthy mentally. I don't know, to lose your mind over a team of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds making millions and millions of dollars. Look, it's just a game when all is said and done. And look, again, perhaps some of you want to talk about this. I will say this, that Austin Matthews and his comments about passengers in the post-game interview, saying that basically calling out some Leaf players, I thought was tasteless and tone deaf, especially considering he didn't exactly light it up. Mitch Marner is gone. They're not going to get anything for him because he wouldn't waive his no trade clause, so they'll lose him. They'll save cap space and be able to sign some other players for the $13 million or whatever would cost to sign him. But and Brendan Shanahan, of course, at the very top, probably going. I don't know. If you want to talk about the Leafs, you can certainly do so. How about the Edmonton Oilers, though? And Edmonton's going to play Dallas. Winnipeg lost. And that was a tough loss, of course, for Winnipeg. But the Jets, President's Cup winners, as often do, exit the playoffs too soon. So some things you can talk about. Canada Post. How about Canada Post receiving strike notice from the union representing more than 55,000 postal workers with operations poised to shut down by the end of the week? Yes, we're doing this again, everybody. It's hard to believe that we're doing this again. A number here that just jumped right out at me is the company has a $845 million operating loss in 2023. That's almost $1 billion in operating loss. Clearly, this organization, this Crown Corporation, is got massive problems. Needs to restructure. And I don't know how much strength the bargaining unit has when that's the economic situation. I really don't. It'd be like if you were working for a private company, for a company in the private sector that was hemorrhaging money, and your employees were going on strike. It just would never happen. But I think that this something's got to be done. Some restructuring. I don't know what the future of Canada Post is, but what are your thoughts on Cup W potential strike, work stoppage as early as Friday? And look, perhaps some of you don't care. And I think the last time they striked, we didn't really get a whole lot of people talking about it. Because I think for the most part, people have moved on outside of some utilities and some bank statements. Outside of that, I think most people have moved on from Canada Post and figured out other ways to circumvent Canada Post and to use other sources. So this is something else you can talk about. And Mark Carney and a flip-flop, I guess you could call it that. We'll talk about this with Don Desserud of UPEI, political science professor at 10:45. And there will be a fall budget after all. And I think that you can only call it a flip-flop. That's the only term that comes to my mind. Not necessarily a bad thing, I suppose. Look, politicians get roasted when they don't listen to people and opponents and the opposition, and they get roasted when they do. Right? So you're in a no-win situation. I think that any way you crack it up, this was a misstep by Carney and his finance minister and his cabinet, because now they have to explain this. Why did you not offer, say you were going to have a fall budget, and suddenly now you decided you're going to? Clearly it was from blowback from the public. That's pretty simple. And as they always say, when you're explaining, you're losing in politics. So this is something else that perhaps you might want to talk about when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. And Rob Thacker will be back this week for the Science Files between noon and 1, so look forward to chatting with Rob and taking your calls with the Science Files as well. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job, as always. All right, joining me now is Rhonda Tulk-Lane, Atlantic Chamber of Commerce CEO. Rhonda, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, as always.
Oh, you're welcome, Todd.
All right. So when it comes to tariffs and our region, what's the very latest?
So I just got back from the B7, and that's a B, not to be confused with the G, which will happen later next month. Yeah. And I got to say, so I was there representing our membership in Atlantic Canada and the businesses. And it's kind of hard. I couldn't give it one word, but it was exciting, heavy, a sense of urgency, really interesting to hear the other 7 countries, their perspective on what's happening right now, and a particular focus for us, I think, watching what the U.S. speakers and ambassadors were saying.
Okay, what were they saying?
Yeah, so we had some really top-notch speakers that came and joined us from the U.S. One that stood out for me was the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Peter Hoekstra. He was interesting. He's originally from Holland. He knew a lot about Canada, which is always good, right? When you get someone put on the file from the U.S. that's going to be working with Canada, you want to know that they've been here. He's been all over Canada. But, I don't think it's going to be a surprise for your listeners, but it's going to be really, really hard for us to do. So the states, they're open for business. We just got to take it slow, and it's a little messy there right now. But some of the things that he shared was that they have never experienced the speed at which things are happening right now in this administration. And I think when you're watching the news, you can see that, good or bad, there's a speed and a sense of urgency to get things done. But they really do want to work with Canada. And I think the biggest thing is around rebuilding the trust. That really was lost. You and I talked in January or February around all the things that were rolling out around the tariffs. So trying to rebuild that trust is going to be critical for the G7 leaders, definitely.
Well, rebuilding the trust means you have to have some continuity to your messaging and some predictability. And this is the problem with Donald Trump, in my opinion, in this administration, is you just never know what you're going to get. Is that not, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And of course, with the B7, the 7 that we're talking about is, of course, Canada, US, France, Italy, the UK, Japan, and I'm missing one there. I'll think of it in a minute. What everyone was saying was around having certainty and stability, and we need it. So we had a lot of global business leaders from the U.S. who are also watching this and trying to figure it out. And it is hard to do. But I think what we've been seeing, and if you look at kind of the patterns, when messages come out from this U.S. administration, there's kind of a shock and awe. Then there seems to be a little bit, I don't call it backtracking, but ease or something happening there. So hopefully we've learned a lesson that if we wake up tomorrow and there's something with shock and awe, that we just take a minute to breathe. And this was actually Nikki Haley's message. So Nikki Haley, you and your listeners would know, she ran against Trump for the presidency. She spoke at the conference, and she did say, we just need to take that breath when they wake up, because I think that's what they also do in the States, to breathe, see what happens, watch the news cycle happen, and then see where we go from there, but not to act on it right away.
What's your thoughts, and what was the messaging on counter tariffs and how useful or not they are?
Yeah. So at the conference, we didn't discuss about counter tariffs and if they're useful or not, because there's a whole bunch of theories on that where a lot of economists will say they're just not useful at all. Of course, we're seeing it. We're also seeing an easy and a changing, as you mentioned, with the Trump administration. The Canadian Chamber actually presented a communique that will be brought forth for the G7 leaders to look at next month in Alberta. So the G7 will be meeting in Alberta, which is interesting in itself. So there was a lot of focus on strategic trade coordination. And one of the areas that I can't wait to explore, and I had never actually done much research on this before, but it was around plurilateral agreements. So we always hear the word multilateral agreements, but this plurilateral agreements are when organizations come together voluntarily and focus on a specific thing that they want to work on. So this seemed to get a lot of traction at the conference, and something that the World Trade Organization is hoping to facilitate versus these mass multilateral agreements coming out for a whole bunch of countries. So this would be very different and very focused in the areas where we want to work together. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at trade agreements and things of that nature.
What are your members of the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce telling you about counter tariffs?
Yeah. So we did a survey not too long ago from all of our chambers and the members, and basically they did say we want free trade and we want it to open up and we want to knock down the barriers, but we really didn't get a good sense on where they stand and who's for counter tariffs or not for counter tariffs. As I said, I think it's a whole school of thought whether you use them or not, but basically what we're doing and what we've heard from our members is that we want to work within Canada to remove trade barriers and for us to get it together, move fast, and get on the same page so then we can do business with the world.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm getting at is that we heard last week that food prices are going to go up. How much exactly, we were not sure, but Loblaw said they're going up. We assume that Sobeys will say the same thing, and we would assume that importers across the region would be going through the same thing with counter tariffs. And we don't need to impose counter tariffs. This is self-imposed, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a stance that Team Canada took to retaliate and show firmness, and that we need to do what we have to do. But as I said, it's really complex. And I remember earlier on when each of the provinces were talking about tariffs, some of the premiers would be saying to us, it's not easy, it's complex, but we have to figure it out, and we have to figure out where we are, and we have to work together. So we are seeing right now that we have imposed tariffs as well. But I do believe that as I said, there's been a softening. We're seeing slowly the percentage of tariffs lowering. So, I mean, hopefully we can figure it out and figure out what the best solutions are, but not getting a clear sense on where where we stand on that. But we have, as Canada, put tariffs on tariffs.
Okay, so when it comes to cross borders and interprovincial trading, I should say, how confident are you or are your members that the federal government can get this done? Because it's not just the federal government, as you well know, it's the provincial governments have to agree as well. And I know that there have been some agreements between provinces, including Nova Scotia and Ontario and others, but still a lot of work to be done and a lot of ramifications as a result of this, perhaps some not even foreseen. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think to take it down from this larger level, when you're sitting at the B7 and you're hearing these things again, not earth shattering, but we've got to work together. We've got to put prosperity over protectionism. It sounds easy. When you break it down then to each country, and then you go further and look at the jurisdictions, for us provinces, it gets real tough and it gets real sticky. So by no means is it going to be easy, but we are feeling hopeful with Prime Minister Carney's message to remove and look at the barriers to remove barriers to trade by Canada 1. So July 1. So we're really excited and looking forward to July 1, Canada Day, to see what happens. But you're right, Todd. The premiers have such a big role to play in this, and that was why we took our message to each of them, and we focused and shared a document with them on the areas we think we can see movement, and some of those were labor mobility and trucking. The cost of trucking goods and services from across one end of Canada to the other is crazy. So we've got some priorities already listed that we're hoping the premiers and the new Prime Minister will work together on.
Rhonda, appreciate your time as always. We'll do it again.
All right, Todd. Have a good one.
All right, take care. Rhonda Tulk-Lane, Atlantic Chamber of Commerce. Iain Rankin is raising concerns over Halifax Water's recent application to the Utility and Review Board proposing a 16.2 increase in residential rates for the upcoming 2025-26 year. We'll talk with Iain Rankin when we come back. All right, joining us is Iain Rankin, Liberal MLA, represents the riding of Timberlea-Prospect. Iain, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course. Well, we lost Iain Rankin. All right, perhaps Iain Rankin will call us back in just a moment or so. I'm sure we'll make contact with him. Yeah, he's calling back there now. Okay, I'll read a bit of the letter that he put together for the minister. Actually, we'll join him right now. Hi, Iain Rankin. How are you?
Hey, sorry about that. I'm not sure if that was my end, but great to be on the show again.
Well, I'm sure it could have been me after a long weekend. I might hit a wrong button. That's happened before. I'll admit it.
No problem.
All right, here we go. So you wrote a letter to the minister talking about Halifax Water's recent application to the Utility and Review Board proposing a 16.2 increase in residential rates for the upcoming year. Over the next 2 years, the combined increases for water, wastewater, and stormwater services would drive the average household bill up by more than $300. And this has got a lot of people concerned, and I think rightfully so. Tell us about the letter.
I wrote to the letter after seeing the response from government after cabinet. So they have said that they're going to be intervening at the UARB, and that's a good thing. But the messages that they're going to be bringing is around affordability and cost of living rising, and these are things that we all know about. I'm sure the UARB knows about that. But what I'd like to know more about is what the government can actually do today to help mitigate these increases. And another thing that I saw was that the deal has been signed with the federal government for a very large amount for infrastructure. Part of that eligibility would be around water infrastructure. And I think it's timely, and now's the time to start to talk about it. They should have already been having these conversations, but we have that funding. And I see a role for the province to play, to invest in infrastructure. We have a large infrastructure deficit in a number of areas, and Derek and I will be talking a lot about that in the months ahead, but we need to invest in infrastructure, and there's a lot of money on the table to do that.
Okay, but that said, we don't want to let the utility off the hook here, do we?
Not at all. And I think I'd like to understand more about some of the issues around the weaknesses in operations that led to the power outages, and that included Timberlea area, but a lot of Halifax at the Pockwack treatment facility. So I think customers, our ratepayers, need to understand why that service quality wasn't there while they're asking for nearly 40% over the next 2 years. What has been the maintenance plan over that time? And I did notice also last year there was a new approval for a large operational building in Burnside. So that's another $70 million plus. It was reduced slightly by the UARB, but that's a very large investment. So why is that needed? Brand new building when there could have been other options to look at, potentially leasing and other options that could have maybe been less of a cost, because that's not an investment in our water quality. So I'd have a number of questions, but for today, what the government can do immediately is look at how to help. Like, these are their population growth targets that are necessitating some of this investment as well, the provincial targets. So has that conversation happened with the Premier or his minister designate to talk about where is our investment obligation here to invest in our water system, because it is putting pressure on the system, and all of these things need to be looked at.
How about the process itself with the review board and justifying this? Do you think it's a fulsome enough process?
Well, I don't want to cast shade on the members that are serving on that board, but I am concerned about what they've already approved. I would be concerned about looking at how the utility itself has been managed and what kind of maintenance plan, like the preventative maintenance, which anyone who's been in property management knows that upfront investment can prevent large sticker shock investments in infrastructure. And so why is this so short term? Why are they coming back in 1 year increments to look at new investments? And why is there no longer term plan to invest in infrastructure and help with mitigating these abrupt cost increases that the people are dealing with already with power bills, with food? And so the province can talk about a slight decrease in income tax, but if you ask the average family if their costs have gone down, and you look at all their utility bills going up, you just talked about food going up, it's getting more expensive in this province. And I think a key underlying factor of that is a lack of investment in our infrastructure. And with Halifax Water specifically, we need to look at what's happening operationally.
Okay, there is a perception though that the UAB, the review board, simply rubber stamps a lot of these requests, and whether that's deserve it or not, that's the perception from many people. I hear from many of them. I'm sure you do as well. What's your response? What do you tell people who have that assumption that the review board will simply just give Halifax Water or Nova Scotia Power, or anybody for that matter, that goes looking for an increase, that they'll get it? What do you tell people that feel that way?
Well, I think like any other public body, criticism's fair, and I think there's a process for which people can intervene. We're planning on probably doing a written submission, as we've done as a caucus in the past, to look at a number of these factors. They would have access to consultants to start to look at some of these issues that are being proposed for increases of costs, and that's what they have to rely upon. And I would be looking at, like, what is the strength of the operations? What is the strength of even the board governance in itself at the utility? And do they have the expertise they need in terms of engineers and business-minded type people? And what can we look at? Because I think the average customer, certainly in Timberlea, but across CHRM, would be saying, well, wait a minute, there was a power outage, we couldn't even access the water, and we know about that issue, and at the same time they're asking for significant increases that were supposedly unforeseen. And this goes back to infrastructure, and we have options to look at investing in infrastructure. It's never too late to start to look at that, and there's money on the table.
All right. So any response from Minister Tilley on this?
No, I mean, I'll certainly give him some time. I just put that letter in play this morning, and I look forward to seeing how they will address this issue, because it's their constituents as well. And I just don't accept that a letter from the government pleading with UARB that these are affordability costs that are concerning is enough. I think they need to start to look at both the investment, and that's the same with power rates. Like that's another key reason why power rates have been escalating, is a lack of investment in our connection on the grid. And this is all going back to that lack of investment. And Nova Scotia and Halifax is getting more expensive, and again, these are some of the reasons why is the growth rates in our population. So we need to keep up with that investment, and the province can't abdicate their responsibility in making sure that they're part of this conversation.
Iain, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Always a pleasure, Todd. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Iain Rankin, Liberal MLA, representing the riding of Timberlea-Prospect. Nova Scotians rather strongly support the province's mining and quarrying industry as Canada faces extraordinary threats to its economy and sovereignty, according to a new poll. We'll discuss this when we come back. All right, Nova Scotians strongly support the province's mining and quarrying industry as Canada faces extraordinary threats to its economy and sovereignty, according to a new poll. Joining us to discuss this is Sean Kirby, Executive Director of the Mining Association of Nova Scotia. Sean, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd.
All right, so tell us about the poll. Who conducted the poll, first of all?
The poll was commissioned by us and done by ThinkWell Research, a well-known local polling firm, and it found a bunch of really interesting information. In particular, with President Trump threatening Canada's economy and sovereignty, the poll found that 75% of Nova Scotians see the mining and quarrying industry as an important way to help maintain Canada's economic independence. Which is a really important finding, I think, given the extraordinary challenges that we face as a province and as a country. It also found a bunch of other really interesting things. For example, 76% of Nova Scotians support mining critical minerals, which are so essential to achieving climate goals, and that's an 11-point increase year over year. So again, it speaks to the people's understanding of the fact that President Trump poses such a significant challenge for Nova Scotia and Canada. So the polling was really very interesting, and it really highlights both the challenges and opportunities that we face as a province.
All right, why do you think there's a change in attitude according to the polling anyway?
Well, there's always been strong support for our industry, but I just think we really see both in our polling and in sort of the comments from Canadians and polling across the country that Canadians understand that we need to build a stronger, more self-reliant province and country, and that our resource industries are a way to do that. We have so much unrealized potential in our resource industries. They're huge employers in this province and really the backbone in many ways of the provinces and the country's economies. But at the same time, we can do so much more. And that's the case with our industry here in Nova Scotia. We employ about 3,000 Nova Scotians and pay average total compensation of about $102,000 a year. So these are a lot of jobs and a lot of high-paying jobs. But we know that we can create a lot more jobs for Nova Scotians by focusing on critical minerals, by getting more support from the government of Nova Scotia to help us take advantage of the really extraordinary geology that we have in this province.
All right, actively right now, kind of approximately how many mining sites do we have in the province? Do you know?
We have about a dozen, larger operations, and there are many, many smaller quarries which provide aggregate for construction projects as needed around the province. And again, it adds up to a total of about 3,000 Nova Scotians who are employed by our industry in high-paying jobs. So we are a large and important industry in the province, especially in the rural areas where most mines and quarries are located. But we know there's a lot of potential to do more. We have really tremendous geology in this province, but we have to, have more support from the provincial government to help us get new sites open, find those deposits, and create more jobs for Nova Scotians, and help generate more revenues to help pay for government programs like health and education.
Well, it certainly looks as though that this government is on target for moving in that direction at the very least. What are your thoughts on the current government?
Yeah, we're very grateful that the current government is strongly supporting our industry. As we talked about a few times recently, it repealed the province's uranium ban, which was in place for almost a half century. And that sends a really important signal to the global industry that Nova Scotia is open for business, that we want to create the jobs and attract the investment, and that the government really is committed to making policy and permitting decisions based on science and facts, not myths and misconceptions. So kudos to the provincial government for doing that. The next thing that we really need the government of Nova Scotia to focus on is fixing Nova Scotia's permitting system for the mineral sector. We really have a permitting system that is not working well for our province, for our industry here. And there's a push across the country and really around the world to help expedite permitting for new mines, because we need hundreds of new mines in order to provide the minerals needed to achieve climate goals, so that we have the raw materials necessary to build things like electric vehicles, wind turbines, and solar panels. And we're calling on the provincial government to restructure our permitting system by putting one department in charge. That's how every other province in the country structures their permitting system for the mineral sector. But we've ended up with a unique and unfortunate system in Nova Scotia where a bunch of different departments are in charge of permitting the mineral sector, but no one department is in charge. And the result of that is that most of the government's experts in mining and minerals actually have no role in permitting our sector, and the government officials who do most of the permitting of our sector are generally not experts in it. And so that's backwards. That's clearly, completely the wrong way to design our permitting system, and every other province in the country has it designed the opposite way, with one department in charge with a center of excellence of experts in things like environmental sciences, geology, and mining engineering, all in one group that can work together to regulate their mining industries efficiently and effectively. And that's really what the government of Nova Scotia needs to do to help facilitate us finding the mineral deposits that are so important and actually getting them into production so we can create jobs for Nova Scotians.
Okay, one of the recurring concerns that I hear is the geography of Nova Scotia is much different than other jurisdictions where mining is quite heavy. Western provinces, as you well know, the province is just simply too small when it comes to geography, and people have concerns about water tables and specifically communities which most people are on wells. What's your response to those who have concerns, saying that the proximity of mining to residential areas and communities is just simply not far enough? What's your response to that?
So one of the biggest challenges that we face as an industry is misconceptions about it, and really that stems from historical mining practices that were not good enough and unfortunate environmental legacies from prior generations. We completely agree that practices in the past were not good enough, but the modern mining industry is completely different. It's a very sophisticated, modern, high-tech industry that takes excellent care of the environment. And so I think when people have those sorts of perceptions, it's really on us to do a better job explaining to people how we work, why we matter, how we contribute to everything in their daily lives, and how we take excellent care of the environment. But, with the operations that we have currently operating across the province, many of them are, in fact, quite close to communities and to neighbors. And what I think the people find in those cases is that the companies are excellent neighbors. They take excellent care of the environment. They really work with the local communities to contribute to it and to make sure that we aren't a problem in any way. And that's really been the experience of communities across the province in the modern era. So, yeah, we need to do a better job explaining that to people and helping, people understand why so many of the perceptions they have about us really are rooted in the distant past. But the reality is we're a very sophisticated, modern, science-based business today that takes excellent care of the environment while providing materials that we all use every day in our daily lives. Your phone, for example, contains dozens of minerals and metals extracted all over the world. We really would be living in the Stone Age if it weren't for the modern mining industry providing the materials that we need for just about everything in our lives.
Yeah, and of course there's the argument out there that we expect to be able to have all these resources and benefit from them by other jurisdictions taking some risk, because there's always some risk. I think you'd agree that nothing is without risk. And yet we here in Nova Scotia aren't willing to take on any of that risk ourselves. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we really need to keep in mind sometimes that the voices against development don't represent the majority of Nova Scotians. I mean, that's, and again, what I think our polling tells us. 75% of Nova Scotians support our industry and see us as being really important to helping maintain Canada's independence as President Trump is threatening our economy and sovereignty. So I really think it's important for folks in the media like yourself and people reading social media to keep in mind that the naysayers really don't represent the views of most Nova Scotians. When we do a poll like this and we see 3/4 of Nova Scotians supporting our industry, understanding that we're essential to the province's economy, understanding that we're essential to things like achieving climate goals, I think Nova Scotians do actually support it and Nova Scotians get it. It's really that we need to keep in perspective that sometimes the loudest voices do not represent most views.
Yeah, and like anything, you've got people entrenched in either side of it, and then there's always the undecided or those who are willing to look at different points of view. That's really the group that you're targeting here, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what we want as an industry is the opportunity to try to provide, educational, fact-based, science-based information to people so that they can actually understand how we work and how we operate today and take care of the environment, to a really high level. And that's really what we're looking for. As an association, we spend most of our time just trying to provide that sort of educational information and answering questions. But, look, I think Nova Scotians do get it. Nova Scotians understand that, resource industries like mining and quarrying are really the backbone of the province's economy. We're really important to helping create the jobs that Nova Scotians need, and especially with the extraordinary challenges that we face. So I do think most people get it. I just think, most people, the silent majority, are busy working and getting their kids to their extracurriculars and doing these sorts of things. And so they're not, day to day speaking out about their support for our industry or or other resource industries. They're just living their lives as they should. And so it really, I think, is important for our association to do an excellent job trying to share educational information with people, and for everybody to keep in mind that sometimes the media coverage or things they see on social media aren't factual and don't necessarily represent the views of the silent majority of Nova Scotians who absolutely understand that our industry is important and that we really need to develop our economy and create jobs in order to build a stronger, more self-reliant province.
Sean, appreciate your time. We'll do it again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. That is Sean Kirby, Executive Director of the Mining Association of Nova Scotia. Perhaps something that some of you might want to weigh in on when we open the phone lines in just a little bit. Talk politics with Don Desserud when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, joining us for a chat is Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor. Don, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
All right, so there will be a budget after all this fall. Is this officially the first flip-flop of the Carney era?
I think so. That was a strange misstep. That was what we'd call an amateur mistake. And if you would think that if this was a new government that didn't have a slew of cabinet ministers with lots of experience, you could excuse it. But that was very odd. Glad that they had the sense to backtrack on that. This is an essential principle of responsible government, that the government doesn't spend our money unless it has the approval of the elected branch of government, and to go for that long without a budget was really inexcusable.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and an unneeded, unnecessary mistake as well. It wasn't as though this was it just seemed like a dumb mistake. Yeah,
and I guess that is going to happen, though. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that I don't know who made that decision, whether it was Carney himself, and if he did, where were the people around him that know better? If it was somebody else that made that mistake, this is one of those circumstances where Poilievre got it dead on right. When he said you can't campaign by saying that we're the party with the plan, and then come into office and say, well, actually not yet, but we're working on one. So this it's a step. It's a backward step. It's a flip flop, as you say. But whether people will remember this in a few months, I guess, is another question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, likely they won't. But that said, the old expression when you're explaining you're losing in politics is applicable here, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and they've got to move on quickly, but it does raise questions about the competence at that level. I don't mean with Prime Minister Carney himself, but with the people who are advising. I mean, we might want to have a look around the room and see whose advice from whom he's receiving advice and which advice he's accepting.
Yeah, I would think, though, in fairness, not to justify it, but it is a complex time, the times that we're living in, to produce a budget because of all the moving parts, in particular with the United States, and we don't know what we're dealing with. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I would think, when it comes to constructing a federal budget right now.
Yeah, and there's different ways of handling that. They have a budget cycle that's well entrenched, that's well established. It takes basically a year from budget to budget, but they're not sitting around idle while they're waiting for the next budget date to come up. So they should already have all the parts in place because of the cycle that's been going on since the last budget. So they should be capable of coming up with something like an economic update, which they said that they would have in the fall, and their first go round, and then you can change it. As you said, things are volatile right now, but you're not going to. You don't need to set something up that's so permanent that you can't possibly change it. Budgets are aspirational; they're not contracts. They're what government would like to do, and if you look at what governments do compared to what they say they're going to do in their budget, it's a little closer to reality than, let's say, an election platform would be. But they're not the same thing. So this is what they want to do, and people understand that they have to change that, and they have every opportunity to do so.
I'm very interested to see how Mark Carney performs in question period, and we know that the relationship between Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau was volatile, to say the very least. Justin Trudeau really put his emotions on his sleeve, and to the point where it was almost hard to watch. Poilievre would egg him on. Two different people now. This time Andrew Scheer for now, and Mark Carney. What are your thoughts on that dynamic? Because I just don't see Carney taking the bait, and I'm not sure what to expect. What are your thoughts on question period and that dynamic?
Yeah. That's a wonderful question, and I'm really looking forward to that because let's start off with the leadership debates during the campaign, when a lot of people were saying this is going to be a disaster for Carney. Poilievre is going to have him for breakfast. He's going to he's a very skilled debater, and turned out not so much. Carney more than held his own, but then not the best example, but it's something that might be telling. Watch how Carney deals with press scrums when he's doing his media scrums, and how he fields questions from reporters. He's testy, or he can be. He gets impatient. He dismisses them. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays in the House of Commons. It might play very, very well. In fact, it might show. It might actually do what you're saying, but on the other side. In other words, get under the skin of the opposition leader, whichever one we have, and he may do very well. It was said about Justin Trudeau, by the way, that he loved question period in the earlier days. He loved the debate. He loved the challenge, and then towards the end, as you said, it became increasingly difficult to watch. I don't know that Carney is going to like question period at all. I suspect that it's going to be a while before we see him play a regular role. He'll get called on that. He'll say, "Where the heck's the Prime Minister?" But I suspect that at first he'll wonder what the heck this is all about and why he has to put up with it. But that's going to be a real interesting a contest to watch.
From a strategy standpoint, though, I would think that whoever's advising Mark Carney, the last words that they'd probably whisper in his ear as he's heading into question period is stay on brand, be cool, be calm, do not take the bait. What are your thoughts?
Do not take the bait and use that old strategy of simply repeating the same thing over and over again. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Don't follow the path. Don't accept the premise of the other side. Be very clear about in your answers, but keep them simple. He obviously has certain skills that will lend themselves well to that environment. He's had to have probably very contentious meetings with various government officials, including prime ministers, when he was governors of the different Bank of Canada and Bank of England. But those are not debates, not the same thing. But he's had to have arguments over policy. So it'll be interesting to see whether he brings that into the House or whether he becomes very, very short in his answers and dismissive.
Yeah, I think boring is better for Mark Carney and the Liberals at this point.
That's what did them well in the campaign, and I think people were hoping for that because they wanted something that was comforting and stable, and at least those people who voted Liberal, that's what they were looking for, and I think that's part of. It's hard to say that was a problem for Poilievre when you look objectively at just how well he actually did. He didn't win the election, but the number of the votes that he received and the inroads that he made into constituencies that would not normally be voting for the CPC, was actually quite remarkable. But nevertheless, I think that was what people were concerned about was that he did not have that sort of quiet stability that people think we need right now.
And do you think that they're going to have any problems finding a vote or two to get to pass legislation, or what are your thoughts on who they ask and how they might handle that situation?
Yeah, I don't think they have any trouble at all. And in fact, a related question might be: are they going to be pursuing people to cross the floor? And I would suggest no, because frankly, the whole point of having party solidarity requires people to actually be devoted to the party, and someone who's crossed the floor could actually cause them more problems than not. So they're going to assume that the NDP with doesn't even have official party status right now is not going to go in going to do anything that could prompt an election. Nobody wants another election. In fact, I don't even think they're going to have a whole lot of trouble with the CPC in the short term. So no, I don't think that's going to be an issue at all.
Okay, Don, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You take care.
All right, you as well. Don Desserud, UPEI political science professor. Interesting as always. All right, what is on your mind? We've got an open hour and time to take your calls. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Perhaps you want to weigh in on some things that you heard this morning. Had an interesting chat with Sean Kirby of the Mining Association of Nova Scotia, who talked about a poll that they released, that they commissioned rather, and released the information. And according to the poll, the vast majority of Nova Scotians support the mining industry and the expansion of the mining industry. Of course, not everybody's going to agree with that, and some people who have sent me emails have already expressed their displeasure with the messaging, as you might expect, which is fine. That's what it's about. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with Sean Kirby? Should the government be moving forward with uranium exploration and continued exploration of critical minerals? Or you can talk about whatever else you like. Cup W is going to be striking, looks like, at the end of the week. And the Leafs. My gosh, the Leafs. So if you want to get into that, you can certainly do so as well. 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, your calls, 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? Again, 902-405-6000. And lots to get to. Look, folks, I get it. Some of you out there who aren't sports fans, you probably wonder why people are so invested in sports and in particular the Leafs. And I get it. I really do. That said, though, I know that for many of you out there, you're passionate about this, and I'm not criticizing that at all. I'm a sports fan myself, and I've said on the show a number of times, of course, that I'm not nearly as passionate about sports as I once was. And again, I'm not suggesting that that's good or bad, or that's just my experience. But I guess what I'm getting at is I understand what it's like to be incredibly passionate about a sports franchise, and in particular about the Leafs. And long-suffering Leafs fans. Another massive collapse in Game 7, and it's the way they lost as well. The best of three, this came down to, and you have both games, or two games in your own building, and you lose by a collective score of 12-2. It's just unimaginable that could happen. I mean, this looked like a junior B team out there against an NHL team. I would dare say there's probably many AHL teams that could have played Florida better than Toronto did in those two home games. I would bet that the Marlies would probably have put up a better effort. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? And what comes next? What do the Leafs do? And what's the future of Mitch Marner, who's the whipping boy right now in Toronto? He's extremely unpopular. Had 102 points or 101 points this season. But didn't get it done in the playoffs. His contract's up, and he's going to be demanding, I would expect, upwards of $12-13 million a year. So what are your thoughts on that? They're locked in with Matthews for many, many years now, and he's wearing the C, so he's not going anywhere. Tavares' contract is expiring July 1st. What's his future? And why are some people so fanatical about sports? I would suggest that it's rooted in our childhood. Memories and nostalgia of being a kid, and we carry that through our lifetime, perhaps. I'm not a psychologist by any stretch or a psychiatrist, but I would bet that most sports fans out there who are extremely fanatical about sports, the seed of that was planted in your youth. I would guess. Not always. Some people adopt a team as they grow older and get into sports as they get older, but not to the degree of being a fanatical follower of sports. So there's that. And of course, in the real world, so many other things to talk about. Cup W might be striking. Canada Post is absolutely adrift and needs a complete retool. And if you don't believe me, there's one empirical statistic that I will cite that tells the whole story, in my opinion. For the year 2023, Canada Post had an $845 million operating loss. That's almost $1 billion, folks. Operating loss. And if that doesn't demonstrate that there's massive need for complete restructuring, then I don't know what does. And for the union to come out and be in any type of position of strength, I don't know how they can do it when the company's hemorrhaging money like that. The Crown Corp is absolutely hemorrhaging money. So the Cup W strike or work stoppage, whatever we're calling it, on potentially as early as Friday, do you care? And does it impact your life in any way? There are a lot of small businesses that are impacted by this, and many charities. To me, that is where the rubber meets the road. In particular, many charities are suffering and struggling because many people send in donations via Canada Post. And that's how they do a lot of their business is through Canada Post. And when that's not there, then people will simply stop, or many people will stop donating because of that one reason. And I get it. It's potentially very impactful for some, but for most people out there, I would suggest there's a shoulder shrug of indifference when it comes to Canada Post and Cup W and a work stoppage. 902-405-6000. And what are your thoughts on the federal government and the fact that the Carney government is flip-flopped, its first official flip-flop of the Carney era? It will indeed table a fall budget after a lot of backlash and hand-wringing. And mining as well. Earlier in the show, I chatted with Sean Kirby of the Mining Association of Nova Scotia, talking about a poll in which they commissioned, which, according to the poll, would indicate that the vast majority of Nova Scotians support the proliferation of mining here in the province, and most people believe that it can be done safely. And Sean Kirby says that people's hesitation is rooted in old-school mining practices. Do you agree with that, or do you completely disagree with Sean Kirby, and do you think that that mining is dangerous and the province is too small geographically in order to do it safely and to protect our natural resources, in particular water? 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Gloria. Hi, Gloria.
Hi, Todd. Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. How about you?
You didn't get too upset over the hockey.
Well, it was disappointing, Gloria. I'm not going to lie, but did I lose 1 second of sleep over it? Absolutely not. How about
Not
you?
me. I'm not a Leaf fan.
No, who's your team? I can't remember.
Pittsburgh.
Oh, right, Pittsburgh, exactly.
And I have seen Pee-wees play better than that. Anyway, my topic is not on that this morning, Todd. I watched this on CTV the other morning, and it was also on CBC in May, how patient information is being sold to Big Pharma.
Yep.
I think everybody should really be concerned about that, Todd. This Dr. Cheryl Spitoff, she's the author, and she found that for-profit clinics, data brokers, and pharmaceutical companies collaborate to turn patient medical records into commercial assets used to further the interests of the pharmaceutical companies. They get all the information. They see what the doctors are prescribing. That gives them an opportunity to put the prices up. And the government should be intervening here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is disgusting.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that they can get away with that, isn't it?
Well, they can get away with anything. And then to make matters worse, I watched the Fifth Estate again on our veterinarian hospitals and how they've sold out. And that the focus now is on profit, not on animals. And people, so many millions in Canada, animals are suffering and having to be euthanized. They're dear pets because they can't afford them. In the United Kingdom, they had a big protest the other day demanding the government intervene. And 158 of the companies in Canada are owned by a big corporation in United Kingdom now. And, they're pushing these products. Recently, when I took my little dog up, he eats all human food. They don't like that. But, the vets don't like it. But anyway, I talked about putting on hamburger. I go to my meat store. Oh, no, you should go here. A special store to buy hamburger. Now to take your little dog to have nails done, you can go to the spa, and it's a little over half the price to go to the vet. This is disgusting, and the government should also intervene in this. They've sold their souls. they studied, they took their medical degrees to look after our animals, not for profit. Everybody wants to make money, but not to the interest of our animals. And I'm going to be writing to the Prime Minister about both of these. I'm sure that'll make a big difference. But asking him to intervene in both of these cases, and I hope people listening will do the same, Todd.
Yeah, I would say, Gloria, it does need to be said though that there are some obviously that don't have that are in it for the right reason. I think you'd agree with that, right?
No. If you look at the map, there wasn't one vet hospital locally that didn't have the red circle.
Is that right, eh? Yeah.
That means they're all corporations now.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
It's very sad. And when you think of how people love their pets and they can't stand to see them suffer, so they put them to sleep. It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
But I'm encouraging people to write and ask for the government to intervene in both of these instances. And the other thing they said on Fifth Estate, the next thing will be the dental offices. And after that, the private home care. Corporations will take over it all.
Yeah. Okay,
the big money makers.
Okay, Gloria, appreciate your call as always. Have a great day. All right, thanks so much. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Ron, hello.
Hi, Todd. What a terrible game, eh?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even a game, really. It was, I don't even know if I'd qualify as a game.
I know. It's just disgusting, really. I remember I was living in Toronto in the 80s, and people used to go to the game and wear those bags over their heads.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. But, yeah, I'm thinking Matthews, as far as the captain goes, he's not worthy. I mean, I don't think he gets respect from the players. Not like a Suzuki or a McDavid, you know. And then you look at the players that Toronto has had, like Zach Hyman and Connor Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, they're playing for Edmonton. Maybe that's where Marner should go.
Yeah.
It's just. But the other thing there, a lot of people don't realize is the first round. I mean, the first round they had 3 overtimes and at least won 2 of them. The Senators won the 4th one, and then in the 5th game, Ottawa won 4-0. So it wasn't easy for the Leafs even there. I mean, they're not I don't know what's wrong there. I mean, their organization, I guess. I really don't know. But something's got to be shooken up again there, and maybe it starts at the top of Shanahan. Maybe he should be gone.
Yeah, I don't know what. Sure, get rid of Shanahan for sure. But I don't know how relevant those positions are anyway. How many layers of management do you need to manage a hockey team anyway? Right?
Yeah, that was on Hockey Night there. They're talking about that, and is he a what position is he? Is president or?
Yeah, I think that's the title. Yeah, I think that's the title.
But they're saying, like, is that really necessary? What if he wasn't there? What they get rid of that position altogether? Like,
yeah, you're gonna see that because the company. I think Rogers owns 75% now of MLSE. And I think that I've heard anyway that they're going to streamline the front office because they need to, and there's a lot of waste there. I think as far as Austin Matthews goes, his attitude. Look, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I don't know what goes on in the dressing room. I don't know any of that. All I see is what you see. But from what I see visually, I don't see a real leader there in Austin Matthews as the captain. I don't know how important a captain is to a team, to be honest with you. Perhaps that whole thing is overrated anyway. I don't know. I really don't. But I do know that this team has clearly got some serious internal issues, and something needs to be done. And I don't know how much they can do because of the current situation. The only 2 pieces that they can do anything on is not signing Marner, and that won't be all up to them. I'm sure that Marner will have something to say about that. And Tavares, of course, do they re-sign Tavares? So those are really the only 2 things outside of getting rid of management that they can do as far as I can see.
Yeah, I don't know about Tavares because he's getting older now, and how many other teams would want him?
Yeah, well, there'd be some interest in him for sure, but I don't think Tavares is the problem by any stretch. No. I think Marner's done. He's gone. And the problem with Marner, I shouldn't say the problem with it, but the reality is Mitch Marner is going to go somewhere else, and he's going to score a bunch of goals, and he'll thrive elsewhere.
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay, Ron.
The only thing about Matthews, the only thing I see there is when he's sitting on the bench, how many times he can spit in the ice.
Yeah, I know. It's just unbelievable. That's a nervous tick. Clearly. Thanks, Ron.
Okay.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Matt's first-time caller. Matt, hello.
Hey, Todd, how you doing?
I'm well, you? Yeah, gotcha. Go ahead.
Yeah, love the show. I want to talk some Leafs. I fully agree with the last caller there. Matthews, just his facial features, just his demeanor is not intense enough, I don't think. I mean, if you look, I think we're letting the Leafs down here a little bit. In that first period, as much as they peppered Wall, we had 2 breakaway chances. So, and I think we dinged a post in that first period. So we were technically still in it in that first period. That first goal that they got was horrible defense, just disgusting defense. And then they shut down. I don't see how Matthews can be. I don't think he's a captain. So I agree with your last caller.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that? I mean, and Marner, I like Marner. I think Marner's slightly overshadowed by Matthews in the regular season.
Well, Matthews, I mean, what are you going to do? You're not going to take the C from him after 1 year. That would be a disastrous move. So you're stuck with him for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. I agree. I don't, but look, I don't know what he does behind closed doors. I don't know what he does in the dressing room. All we see is what he does on the bench, and he does not look like he's got leadership quality. But I don't know. Maybe he demonstrates leadership in different ways. I don't know. But we do know this.
Yeah.
In that he didn't get it done, and it's consecutive Game 7s in which they've not gotten it done. And clearly there's a confidence problem on that team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think my man of the series is Max Domi.
Yeah, Domi, there's a leader. There's a guy right there that's a leader as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And as small as he is, or he's not that small, but he's a little cannonball. You know, he was fighting every puck in the corners, every puck, and he'd come out with it quite often. And then he got a goal or two. So he's my man of that whole series. And then in Game 7, he's my man of the match for the Leafs.
Yeah, for sure. If the rest of the team had the passion that Max Domi had and played like that, we'd have a different story to tell right now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I got another star, Max Pacioretty, the old good guy.
Yeah, Max Pacioretty.
I loved him in the series.
Yeah, he played
so our super. Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying he played actually brilliantly in the playoffs, but he's got that experience. I mean, and it's just like Matthews and Marner and the superstars didn't really show.
Well, Nylander did what Nylander. You know what you're going to get with Nylander, right? You're going to get a guy,
exactly.
And Nylander to me is not a part of the problem. I would never ever trade Nylander. I would keep him.
No, I want to keep Nylander for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But as far as Matthews 100%. Goes, I would say
he doesn't want the leadership.
No, God, no. And as far as Matthews goes, you're stuck with him, and let's hope that he figures it out. Mitch Marner, I think, is on his way out. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I would believe so too. Him and Tavares are going. We'll see what we can get for him.
Yeah, well, we're not going to get anything for him because they're free agents.
Oh, yeah, we're not getting a darn thing. Yeah, that's right. So, well.
And look, Wall played well, but I think losing Stolarz did hurt the team ultimately.
That was huge. That was huge. Wall should have had at least 3 of those saves in that last game.
Yep, for sure.
I believe he should have had at least 3 of those weak goals. And that's my say, man. And as we say, there's always next year.
All right, Matt. Thanks for the call, pal. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Take
cheers,
care. All right. 902-405-6000. Look, Austin Matthews. Is he a good captain? I don't know because I'm not in that dressing room. I have no idea. Clearly, Berube and the players would know that, and the Leafs management would know what they've got with Matthews. But based on what I'm watching on the bench look, you have to produce. You lead by example. All the great leaders always led by example and always got it done when it mattered the most. That's how you lead, is you produce. You give your team confidence. And sports is not all about, but look, physically the players are all pretty much the same, really, when it comes to ability goes. There's not much difference. It all comes down to mental state of mind and mental intelligence and confidence. And if your leadership is not demonstrating confidence and not getting it done, that reverberates right through the whole team. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Steve giving us a call. Hello, Steve.
Morning, Todd. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I was a Leafs fan. I still have a little bit in my heart for him, but it was like a bad relationship. You know, you wanted to continue, but the best thing to do was just release yourself from it, just for the mental anguish. And that's from a few years ago. But
Wow.
But having a look at it and leading into and why we as Canadians love this sport, it's like the Europeans in soccer. It's in our DNA. But looking at leadership, you know, within the group that was in that dressing room this year, there are those, and they don't have to have a letter on their chest to be a leader. And I think that's most important for all of us that have played the sport and gone down that road, and we know that. But when it comes to that, or those individuals, you know, being out in the public, and with what the captain of Toronto said after their loss the other night, I was just gobsmacked. I said, did I see the same game and the same series that this guy's talking about and talking about passengers? And if you relate that to Brady Tkachuk and his post-mortem and almost tears in his eyes, and there was a team that was lucky and should have been glad just to make the playoffs, and that is a true leader. That is a guy that wears it on his sleeve, that everyone in that dressing room knows that he is there inside the rink and outside the rink for the Ottawa Senators. But, you know, I think going forward for the Leafs, I like Berube, and I like him as a coach, and I like him as the way he holds himself. I think that he should be able to have a good say on the DNA of what goes forward. And part of the problem is that there are contracts in place that they're not going to be able to do anything about. But you may remember, and I was young when it happened, but remember the big Rangers-Bruins trade with Esposito?
Oh, yeah. They were going way back.
Way back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But a shake-up like that, I know with contracts and the NHL today is very different. But if they were to be able to do something, I'll tell you, in a New York minute, I would take Tkachuk in an even trade with Toronto's captain. I just think that would be such a plus. But in closing, you know, Brad said the other night, and maybe he was buttering up the Toronto fans and the management. You know, he's a UFA, you know, in a couple months. Brad Marchand, and Toronto Maple Leaf fan from, you know, his childhood. And all he's looking for that he never got from Boston was some term. So maybe they could find and give him a couple-year term, and he'd come in and he'd change that dressing room.
Yeah, I've heard some talk about Brad Marchand possibly doing that, and I guess so. Look, you know that you've officially bottomed out when Brad Marchand is defending you in a loss. You know that the Leafs. I mean, that said it all, that Brad Marchand felt so bad for Toronto that he was actually defending the Leafs. And I don't know how you say that this team was different when you lose 2 games at home, game 5 and 7 by a score of 12-2, collective score of 12-2. I don't know how that's any different than any other. As a matter of fact, I think it's worse.
Yeah, it's almost like they started to melt as they have in other years when that puck went off of Riley's glove and in overtime and went into the net, and it was all downhill after that. Yeah. But Marner's gone. I think we've got to hold on, or we're going to have to hold on because of contract with our captain at this point. But there's a few pieces that they could put in there, and I think the top end management has to be changed just for the optics of it, if nothing else. And see what it comes. But Toronto, oh boy, it's almost like you look at baseball and what happened with the Cubbies, and they've had that albatross around their neck for years and years until they finally won the World Series. And what's it going to take, 1967 up to now? And we've been close so many times, and it seems to always happen the same way in the spring. It's almost like you've got to try to get a psychic into that dressing room so that these guys say in May that you can play like you have, from October through to April.
Yeah,
because,
I look at
I don't know,
Steve. I look at the Boston Red Sox and the breaking the curse. And I hate the Red Sox, being a Yankees fan, but man, when they came down from 3-0 against the Yankees to win that series and then to go on and win the World Series, you look at guys like Jason Varitek and David Ortiz. And those were the guys. That's the type of character that you need to have, and it's a DNA. It's an intangible. And I think you're right. You look back at the Leafs when they made that big trade with Calgary, and they brought in Gilmore and a couple other pieces back in the early '90s. That perhaps is something that they need to do. But I don't know. It takes a lot of guts to trade Austin Matthews, a guy who scored almost 70 goals a couple of years ago, and is going to get you 50 goals pretty much every year and 100-plus points. It takes a lot of guts to trade your captain, but maybe that's what it takes.
Yeah, maybe that's what it takes. And it's like you said, when Big Poppy walked up to that plate every time, and we were playing them from Toronto, and I'm a Toronto fan, I said, oh, my goodness. And, and there was anyone on base, boom, it was gone. Yeah. So he had that swagger, and that's what Toronto lacks. They lack that confidence, that ability to go into a series. And it's almost like I felt all the time that Florida was going to win this, just how they were going to win it. Even when we're up 2-0, I was just so tentative to what was going on. Yeah. Anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. I'll let some other callers come in.
Steve.
And thank you. Enjoy the show.
Thanks, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. And Berube, look, you got to give him. You're not going to get rid of Berube after this. There's zero chance of that happening. He's got to get another chance. But I don't know. Like you said, are you going to move Marner? How do you move Marner? I don't know. That to me is a non-starter, or not Marner, but Matthews. That's a non-starter. 902-405-6000. Hi, Chris.
Good morning, Todd. Geez, I got to apologize to you and all the other Leafs fans out there. Like I told you the other day, it's my fault that they lost because I'm not a great hockey fan or sports fan in general, but I usually kind of, when it gets to this time of year, playoffs coming up and whatever, I kind of pick a team, and I pick the Leafs.
Yeah. And
as I told you the last time we talked, or one of the last times, I probably have jinxed them by doing that, and I guess that came to fruition. So I'm going to keep my nose out of sports from now on.
Well, Chris, look, I'm not superstitious, and I suppose I have a little bit of superstition, but I don't think there's a connection between what you said on the show and the Leafs sucking. I'll be honest with you.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway, look, Todd, I normally choose to talk about the political situation in government and stuff, and it's hard for me not to do that, but I have to echo Gloria's sentiments, her call this morning about the veterinary situation. Most people wouldn't know this, of course, because I don't really talk about it, but in the past 30 years, my wife and I have adopted and got homes for probably 200 different cats. And we've been working with the cat rescue for years, well, 30 years almost. Everything now has changed when it comes to taking your pet to the veterinarian. It seems like everything's a money grab. The care, the empathy, sympathy and empathy or whatever seems so much to be gone since all these corporate entities have taken over the veterinary hospitals and practices here. I had one instance a few years ago where we took a little cat in to have her spayed and fixed up and stuff. She was a new stray that we'd gotten, and the vet quoted me a price. When I got to the counter to pay the bill, the invoice was almost double. So I raised the issue with the lady behind the counter and told her that the vet had quoted me a price that was almost half of that. And the first response came out of the young lady's mouth was, well, don't you think your cat is worth it? And I said, that's not the point of whether my cat is worth it or not. I was quoted a price by the veterinarian who did the work. I said, just go get the vet and she'll corroborate what I'm saying. Well, no, she's busy right now. Besides, if she had quoted you a higher price, would you have not gotten the procedure done?
Well,
I'm telling you, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was pissed off, and I was shocked. And yes, I would have paid the price if that had been the price, but the point is it wasn't the price. Yeah. You're not going to pay $2 for something when the price tag or someone tells you it's $1. Anyway, I talked to people all the time that are pet owners. And what government had better start to realize is that, according to narrative research, 66%, that's 2/3 of Nova Scotians own pets. That's a big voting cohort. 66% of the population of Nova Scotia. But everyone I talk to, Todd, has the same feeling when they come away from the vet. They feel good that they got their animal taken care of, or the procedure done properly, hopefully, or whatever. But everyone, and myself included, come away with kind of a I've been taken advantage of feeling. I've been ripped off. I've been treated unfairly on the financial end of it. And I think what Gloria said is right. I mean, the government has a lot on their plate and stuff, but they really should look into this corporatization of the veterinary hospitals. I mean, it's happened. Well, look at car dealerships, grocery stores. I mean, it's everything is getting that way. And dental, God forbid, dental will get that way. And dental, I think she was right when I believe she brought up that point that the dentistries may end up going that way. Because you've got this dental care program that the government brought in, the federal dental care program, and it leaves a perfect opening for corporate entities to take over that business as well. And I mean, it's health care, one thing or another. I mean, it just doesn't stop with groceries or car dealerships or hardware stores or whatever it might be. We see it all the time. But so many people that I know have and will forgo treatments and things that they need themselves so that their animal, their cat, their dog, whatever pet they have, will get the care that pet needs. And you feel, I don't know if you're a pet owner or not, Todd.
Yes, we own a cat and a dog.
Yeah, cat and a dog. Good for you. You don't want another couple, do you?
No, we're good.
But have you ever had that feeling yourself as a pet owner? I don't know if you've been into the vet lately or what have you.
Oh, yes, regularly. Yeah, regularly.
And what I'm saying, do you feel the same sort of thing when you go in, or?
Yeah, look, it's a tough situation. I don't like to cast aspersions on everybody and the entire industry. I know that Gloria said that is deserved in this region. I don't know that, but it's got to be a tough situation for a vet. In many cases, I'm sure that you have desperate people in there who can't pay and want service, and I don't know how they balance that. But this is perhaps why it's become a corporation, because that way, vet owners, look, if you had a practice and you could sell your practice for a bunch of money and work for a corporation and draw a salary and you don't have to worry about all the logistics, and I could see why that would be attractive, Chris.
Yeah, well, there's definitely, and as you've stated, there's definitely a very good business model to be made, or argument to be made business-wise for these conglomerate veterinary operations. It certainly is there, and business will take advantage of a situation when they can. And I don't blame the vet necessarily for saying, "Look, I was just offered," and I'm just pulling this number out of my head, but
$1 million, whatever it would be,
offered $2 million or whatever it might be. And there have been vets over the years. I know there's a lady down St. Margaret's Bay and so on that used to, or Hubbard's area, that used to do discount veterinary services. And a friend of mine has taken a cat as far as Windsor to save a couple $100 and that sort of thing. And it's just, and I get what you said. It is difficult. You've got an economy of scale, of course, and it is difficult sometimes, maybe for an independent veterinarian. And I know is his name Dr. Goodall?
Yeah, Dr. Jeff Goodall, yeah. He's an independent guy. He's not a corporate guy. Not yet.
No, he's not corporate. He seems like a good guy. Yeah. And one of our go-to veterinarians just recently has gone corporate, and we see a difference. We still deal there because we have to take care of our cats, but we see a difference. The corporate entity is not the same as the other.
No, for sure.
When you're dealing with the owner directly, you can maybe make a deal with the owner based on volume. Like in our case, we take a lot of cats there regularly and stuff, and maybe they give you a 10 or 15% discount on certain procedures or checkups because you do a good bit of volume, and we are basically doing a lot of cat rescue and that sort of thing, so that maybe makes a difference.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the call.
Thanks very much, man.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. We'll be back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Kevin's giving us a call. Hello, Kevin.
Good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
This is a summary. Me and you spoke about the Leafs, what was it, a week ago, a week and a half ago?
Yeah.
And we called it right on the head, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know something? A lot of your callers are offering suggestions and solutions. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be very blunt. To lose 6-1 in a seventh game is a disgrace.
Yeah.
You get your ass on the ice and you play to win. You don't play like you look like you want to be fishing in Lake Veinotte.
Well, especially considering they lost Game 5 at home 6-1.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of a team is this? I'm going to tell you what the problem with these guys is.
Yeah, okay.
When they can't face up to the big moment. Yeah. They run from it. What separates winners and losers is winners embrace the big moment. Sure. These guys look like they want to be somewhere else. They don't even look like they want to be there. I was watching the players on the ice. I played hockey for many years, and I could tell by looking at these guys, they look like they wish they were somewhere else.
I think, Kevin, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think they look like a team with zero confidence, a team that they simply did not believe in themselves, and they did not fundamentally believe that they could get the job done. That, to me, is what they look like.
Well, the coach said it in the post game. The problem with these guys is psychological.
Yeah, exactly.
They can't. They don't think they can win the big one.
That's right. That's right.
And as long as you have this core group, you guys might as well forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They got to go. They got to go.
Well, Matthews isn't going anywhere.
Yeah,
he's not going anywhere.
Look. As long as you keep these guys around, it's going to be the same story every spring.
Yeah.
We're going to be saying another loss 10 years down the road. You know, it's a sad story. But defeatism is rife in that organization. The players have a psychological issue with winning the big game.
Mm-hmm.
The regular season and all the statistics don't mean a damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
People get all excited. Oh, we finished in first. We had a great season. It means nothing.
Yeah, means nothing.
You win the big game when you got to win it. And to get beat like that is a disgrace. Jesus, I wish I was coaching. Because paint would have been peeling off the walls in the dressing room.
Yeah, but look, Berube was yelling at the players, and they looked despondent to me. They looked like they didn't even care what he was saying. They didn't even respond.
I don't know. What do these guys think they are? A bunch of prima donnas?
Well, I don't think they are. I know that they are, but there were some bright spots, and a caller mentioned it. Like Domi played his heart out, and Pacioretty. And a couple of the defensemen really played well, and I thought Morgan Riley was horrible.
But the big guys didn't show up.
Yeah, that's true.
See?
Yeah.
And the leaders are not leading.
That's for sure.
And in professional sports, you got to have the leaders.
Okay,
and
Kevin.
These guys are never going to do it. So there you go.
Okay, thanks
there
for the call,
again.
pal.
Another year wasted.
All right, take care, bud. 902-405-6000. Let's talk to Harold. Hi, Harold.
Hey, Todd. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I want to beat on the government for a while. I got my tax return, and it turns out that I owe them $585 or $530 by the time they took what I had. But it turns out that the Nova Scotia government has taken, and I checked with the federal government, and they said, "Oh no, we did nothing." So they said, "Go check with the ones that did your taxes." So I went and I checked with the tax people again, and they said, "Oh, that was the Nova Scotia government that took that." And I said, "Why? I mean, usually I get some money back." Well, they took what I usually get back plus another $530. So I don't know if that happened to everybody or if I'm just a lucky one or what. But I'm a pensioner.
Yeah.
And I'm 73, and I kind of need what
Who did your taxes, Harold? Do you do your own, or did somebody prepare them for you?
No, it was H&R Block. I mean, I don't want to beat them up for it. I mean,
no, but you have to assume that they did their job properly. Do you feel
they did their job? They did their job properly, but nobody told me. Not the premier, not the tax people that did my tax, or nobody. And all of a sudden you get this here, and then you start, well, I was going to buy a tire and, from a car, but now I'm kind of, I got to pay this tax company $530, the government. and it just there's no heads up, no nothing. And we complained about Justin Trudeau, and I did too, about the carbon tax and everything else. And now here we are again. I mean, with the Conservative government, and they're just, no explanation, no nothing. I see on the bottom of the summary return I got from the tax people that they got 9% interest and on the marginal rate, and average tax rate, whatever, they took another 2%. Anyway, GST, HST, and they said, don't worry, the tax people told me, you'll get the money back in August or September. Yeah. You got to make the payments, you got to pay the government, but they're going to give it back to you. You'll get it back in August or September. Now, don't that sound like Justin Trudeau?
I don't know, Harold. I can't comment on your tax return. I really can't offer anything other than to say, I'm sorry that it didn't work out for you, pal. Got to let you go.
No.
We're out of time. Okay. Thanks for the call. I'm sorry, Harold. We're just out of time. I can't offer any comments on an individual's tax return. I don't know. Thanks for the calls, everybody. Didn't get to all of you for that. I apologize. The Science Files with Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. If you'd like to chat with Rob, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. If you have a science-related question, I suppose, or topic that you'd like to delve into, Rob's here to help you, illuminate you. There you go.
I'll give it a stab.
How's that? Here to illuminate you. What do you think of that, Rob?
Turn the lights on.
That's right. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob Thacker, welcome to the show, my friend.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. What's kind of percolating in your mind these days anyway?
We do have something that I think is worth talking about. So we've got the National Research Astronomy Conference coming up at St. Mary's. And so we haven't hosted it for about 15 years. And so we've got about 200 researchers from around the country coming to visit starting on June 2nd through to June 5th. But the thing I do want to mention is we have a public presentation by this year's Hogg lecturer. The Hogg lecture series is in memoriam of Dr. Helen Sawyer Hogg, who was a very famous astronomer back in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And so every other year at the Casco, we actually have a public presentation. So on the Tuesday, which will be the 3rd of June, we'll have a presentation by Dr. J.J. Kevelars from the NRC Hertzberg Institute in Victoria, talking about the solar system and what we can tell about the solar system using telescopes.
Interesting. Yeah. And research is so vital, right, when it comes to, I mean, the ongoing, I suppose, when it comes to research, how much of this is kind of open source and collaborative?
Oh, pretty much all of it. I mean, so one of the things that's happened over the past, I would say, 25 years is that research, certainly in astronomy, has become very much about sharing and collaboration. And to a certain extent, some people say, well, that's taken away a little bit of the competition, but I don't think it has. But nowadays, if you take data, that data becomes public domain, right? And so you have a short period of time in which you can analyze it and so on and do your bit. But after a certain what we call proprietary period, then it all comes out into the public domain. And so now, particularly in the US, they've had this system of what's called archival research, where you literally apply for money to do research on data that's already been taken, right? And so all of that is about the sort of collaborative and open nature of the data we take.
Yeah. And that is kind of a fundamental shift that I think is necessary. And in the world that we live in with the internet and the way to do that in software, that is beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, so astronomy was really out ahead in terms of having our publications accessible easily via what's called preprint servers. So literally before something becomes a paper that's published in a journal, it's in what's called the preprint stage. And you can release it to people. You can say, hey, here's this. It's going over here to be refereed and so on. And so very early on, I would say about the early 1990s, our whole field decided to set up a system whereby people could submit preprints, people could see them immediately before they were published. And that's changed the way we do research, really.
Right on. 902-405-6000. Rafe's giving us a call. Hello, Rafe.
Hi, how you doing today?
We're doing well.
Good. Just a couple of questions. First of all, could Dr. Thacker explain the Doppler effect? How when an ambulance goes by, it goes...
Yes.
Like it changes pitch.
So as it's coming towards you, what you're changing is effectively where the wavefront is launched from. So you kind of bunch them up as it comes towards you. There's actually two types of Doppler shift, but I'll talk about the one that's relative to sound first, right? And so as you're coming forward and it's coming towards you, that's always going to travel at the speed of sound, right? But it's going to have all of its sort of wavefronts, as we call them, bunched up. And so that will increase the pitch of the sound, right, as it's coming towards you. And then as it goes away from you, then you've got the opposite thing happening. You've got literally the position where the wavefront is coming from is going further and further and further away, and so that is actually reducing the pitch. And so you get the as it's gone past you.
So it has nothing to do with like air currents or whatever. It's just the distance.
It's all to do with the movement. I mean. So what's happening in the air is, to a certain extent, not relevant to this. We will always model it as just like a medium that things are going through, right? In this case, it's going to be a pressure wave for sound, but it's really about the movement of the source. That's the key thing you've got to think about. And so in the movement of the source, the movement of the horn in this case.
Okay. And my second question was, I don't know if it's an optical illusion or not, but sometimes you'll be looking at a car going past, and it looks like the hubcaps or the wheels are spinning backwards.
So
like they're going counterclockwise instead of clockwise. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I know exactly what you're talking about. And anyone who has taken a movie of a propeller, right, while they're flying will have seen that happening, where it feels like you can actually catch it and make it run backwards. That's all about what's called the sampling rate of your personal perception, or in the case of a camera, the speed at which that samples, right? So that's really, to a certain extent, an optical illusion.
Oh, okay. So it is, obviously it's not spinning backwards.
Exactly.
Just your perception.
Yep.
You can't pick up the...
I don't know what the answer for what human perception is in that context, but I certainly know when you're doing like 24 frames a second, you can just synchronize things perfectly. So in some cases, it barely looks like the propeller is moving because you keep capturing it at almost the same position.
Yeah, I've seen that before too.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, Ray, appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. The bigger question is why do sirens in North America go, wow, wow, and in Europe they go, wee-oo, wee-oo. What's up with that?
That is an aesthetic choice at some level, I guess. So there may be research about how well the sound carries.
Yeah.
Right? But I would have thought that you want to have something that varies in pitch depending upon what the other sounds are, so you can hear something and make it out. But I suspect people have looked at that.
That is true, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That in Europe and in the UK, it's a different noise, right?
So yes, and funnily enough, even in my sort of lifetime, I can remember the sound of the ambulance siren in the UK changing. Right? They used to have something that was sort of went, wah, 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 and then they got something that was much louder and more aggressive.
Yeah. At the core of all of this, though, is that is an energy that is produced and needs to penetrate and carry on sound. It's at the root of everything. Really, is energy, isn't it? I don't know. I've said this a lot to you on the show, but it's true, though, isn't it?
No, it is true. I mean, and I said this before on the show. Like one of the TV series I really wanted to make was about how energy changes, right? Yeah. We were going to call it Flux and talk about how literally energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can have its form change, though, and that's the key thing. And in fact, one of the things that's really important is energy can go into certain forms that are really not usable anymore, right? And that's really how we tend to sort of think of losing energy. You lose like good energy that you can use effectively.
Yeah.
But overall, yes, energy is at the root of everything.
Okay, so where does it go when it evaporates from the sound wave? What happens to it?
It's literally just expanding out, right?
Yeah.
And so as you expand out, things just get weaker and weaker and weaker because you can think about it. If you're doing from, say, a single point and you're creating this big sphere of sound around you, at some level, it has to get weaker over time because it's getting to a bigger and bigger area. So it necessarily has to be weaker.
So does it become, you say energy can't be created or destroyed? Was that paraphrasing your quote?
Yeah, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But it can
change form. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, as it gets weaker and weaker and weaker, then the compression wave that is the sound wave is just going to get smaller and smaller, and at some point, it's going to be swamped by other things.
But energy has to feed off something, right? Everything has to feed off something, does it not? Does that make any sense? Like something's got to provide that spark.
So here's the interesting thing: if you're saying, is the energy budget of the overall universe fixed? I think we'd probably have to say yes, it is, right? But it's actually a very difficult subject to talk about because while we understand things locally in a certain way, once you go to the universe as a whole, it's especially if we think of the cosmological constant, then that's an energy source that's growing with time. So I think realistically, I have to say that no, the overall energy doesn't have to be constant in time, but in a local environment, it kind of is.
Yeah, I suppose so. The overall output of energy in the universe, would it be ultimately the same? I know that's a massive question, but
again, it's tricky because when the cosmological constant is literally the energy of space, right? As the universe expands, you're getting more energy.
And everything ultimately comes from the sun, does it not?
So for us, it's probably a pretty reasonable argument to say that the vast majority of things that happen on the planet are actually driven by the sun's energy. We do obviously have internal energy as well, geothermal, right? But for a lot of life on Earth, the best way to think about it is it's actually nuclear powered.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fusion?
Yeah, nuclear fusion from the sun, right? And so you take that energy as sunlight gets to here. Very often the bottom of the food chain is photosynthesis, whether it's in algae, whether it's in plants and whatever. And so then as we go through the various levels of the food web, one thing eats another thing, but at the very bottom, it's nuclear energy.
But one is no less or more important than the other when you think about it, right? Ultimately. It's like plankton. Plankton, which seems irrelevant, but if you remove...
completely. I mean, this is one of the things that makes studying food webs a real challenge, right? Yeah. Because they are interrelated. And so if you suddenly have something new come in and sit in the middle of that food web and then start eating certain things, it can really mess things up. Yeah. Right? And so that's why invasive species and studying invasive species is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Give us a call, folks, if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, if you want to get in on the chat or you get another topic altogether science-related. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Again, we've got Rob Thacker till 1 o'clock. Get some room for you as well. 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back.
Facts.
All right, we continue with the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University. Give us a call. Get some open lines for you, folks. 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Again, 902-405-6000. Patrick's giving us a call. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
No problem.
Quick question, or I guess not a quick question. The question is about Mars, Doctor.
Okay.
Now, from what I understand, Mars has no liquid core left. It's frozen or whatever. My question is, how close would Mars have to be to our sun to actually liquefy that core again? Like, I know you can't do the exact math, but a rough guesstimate kind of thing.
So as far as I know, I still think that Mars is very interior, so the iron and nickel core, as far as I know, that's still considered to be molten.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but to the other question, there was water on Earth, correct? Or rather Mars.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. So, I mean, but go ahead, Patrick.
But okay, my question is like Mars lost its atmosphere because its magnetic field died and it got irradiated or something to that effect. Is that essentially what happened? Like that we figure?
Plus it's just small as well, right? So it's all of those things factoring in, yeah.
Okay, so just if you took Mars and moved it closer to the sun so it would have stayed warm and kept everything moving better, would it have survived? Would it be alive?
So I think the reality is, if you just take Mars and move it closer, then the impact of the solar wind is going to be higher, right? So I just don't see how you can keep all of the water there. I just don't see how you can do that.
Right. Okay. No, I was reading something about it, so I was just curious if that was actually a factor, like just keeping the thermal energy going, enough of it to keep it warm and keep everything sort of moving around.
So, there's not much we can do about the mass, right? The mass is what it is, so the escape velocities are proportionally lower. Right. But in terms of having some kind of, as you're thinking of, magnetic field to help protect it, then we'd have to look at, actually, I'm not enough of an expert. I'd actually have to do research to figure out what the past values might have been and what the overall spin would be needed. Right. But it's certainly very weak right now. That's for sure.
No. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for your time, Doctor.
Okay, no Patrick, thank you for the call. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What are some of the governing factors that resulted in planets being where they are in our solar system?
So that's really a challenging research area right now to figure out. So when you look at how planets form, it depends precisely on what kind of planet it is, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a smaller rocky planet like the Earth, then the way that we think they're forming is literally smaller things like asteroids coming together, and under their mutual attraction, then they grow, right? Mm-hmm. And so that actually takes quite a long time, right? And so on the other hand, for something like a gas giant planet like Jupiter, right, there's potentially a number of different ways they can form, including one that's very, very rapid, right, in a few thousand years, where you create as the sun is forming, it would have had a disk around it. That's why all of the planets wind up in a disk. Mm-hmm. They're formed out of that disk, call it the protoplanetary disk. And so for something like Jupiter, it's possible that you can have what's called an instability in the disk, and that suddenly funnels all of the gas onto the planet on a very, very short timescale. Right. Mm. And so that's, like I said, a few thousand years, maybe millions is probably better, but that can happen really quite quickly. And so you've got all of those different processes going on. You've also got all of the energy from the sun itself is determining what things are going to be gaseous at what distance, right? Mm-hmm. So you have ices further out, closer in. You think you're going to have things with higher melting points like rocky materials, metals, and things like that. So yeah, that's what happens. That's called differentiation of the solar nebula, right? And so that is essentially one of the biggest factors, right? So that's one of the reasons why we see terrestrial planets close to the sun mm-hmm. and gas giants and ice giants further out.
Interesting. Yeah. So I suppose when it comes to how big the solar system is that expanding? Is that ever expanding or?
So it's kind of tough to say there's an edge to it. So we do talk about this sort of the limit of the sun's influence, mm-hmm. right, called the heliosphere. So and the edge of that being the heliopause. And so it's tricky to say, because then there's outside the solar system, there's this thing called the Oort cloud mm-hmm. of all of these things that become comets, right? So it does go out further than we think of just talking about good old Pluto being way out there. But there's stuff outside that is in one way or another linked to the solar system.
And then at some point we will be coming connecting against another solar system, and that sphere and that.
Oh, if you go out there, then yes, you're going to go and hit other planetary systems. Yeah. That's completely unavoidable, knowing what we know about how many planets there are. Do
we know anything about any of the makeup of the other solar systems at all, or have we not gone that far yet?
So we're still at the point where everything we find is a special case. I think that's the best way to put it. So we find planets around other stars now by looking for the star moving backwards and forwards, literally being pulled by the planet. We call that a stellar wobble. We can see those, and we've been measuring those for probably, goodness me, 30 years now, which is incredible to say, but we have been. But perhaps the most common way we have now is when a planet literally just goes in front of a star, you get the equivalent of an eclipse, we call it a transit, right? And you can see a sudden drop in the light from the star. And so we've got lots and found thousands of planets by that method, right? And if you can combine the two of them, then you can get really good information about how massive the planet is, about the orbit and things like that. So those are the two main ways, but those are still two very specific situations, right? You got to see the planet go in front of the star from your location, and if it's going around and making the star wobble, you really want to see that from being sort of like in line to make the wobble as big as possible. Because if it's going around like that, around the top and the bottom, from our perspective, then you don't see the wobble.
Interesting. 902-405-6000. We got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour. Get some open lines for you as well. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back.
Backs.
All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. We've got some open lines for you. Again, 902-405-6000. While we await some more calls, an email question from Lee. Lee asked you this, said, I've read a few news articles that the polar ice caps have grown over the past 2 years or so. Is this true? And if so, why is it happening?
I've not heard anything about the polar ice caps actually growing, right? Where? Which planet? Right? So, I mean, we could talk about the polar ice caps on Mars, but on our own, as far as I'm aware, no, the actual ice surface coverage is going down with time. I mean, that's the so-called, I hate to use the term, but it's what people call it, the death spiral.
Yeah.
Right?
Sea level rising is...
so sea level rise is caused primarily by melt of ice that's attached to land. Yeah, exactly. So when you have melt down in Antarctica, for example, that's going to impact sea level rise.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So when it's an iceberg and it's floating, it's not displacing any water.
Yeah, there's a tiny difference associated with salt versus freshwater, but it's, to all intents and purposes, it's pretty much the same.
Okay. All right, fair enough. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. For the Science Files, again, 902-405-6000. Peter's just giving us a call. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hey.
I'm not going to say that I dislike this person, but I probably do. Let's just suggest that the person's name is Donald. And I would like to know how far away Donald would have to be in order for him to be represented by 1 millimeter. Assuming that I'm 1.8 and he's 1.8 meters. So as somebody walks away from you, they appear to get smaller in height.
Okay. So
how do I work that out?
Okay, so yeah, you got to be careful with, because I know what you're asking me, right? But I'm going to try and explain it as clearly as I can. So when something gets further away, what's changing is the angular size it represents. Right? Its height isn't actually changing, right? That's a fixed property of the object. But the angle that it creates when you look at it, that's what's getting smaller.
Right.
Right? So when you say, when would it be 1 millimeter? It's never technically ever going to be 1 millimeter, right? Because that is a measure of height. It's 1.8 meters, right? But if you want to say, could it be the equivalent of a millimeter at, say, 1 meter away from me, we could do that calculation. Right, because we would then calculate what the angle is, which is literally in radians, it would be 1 millimeter divided by 1 meter, right? And so then we could do that, right? But what you got to remember is the key thing is it's the angle, right? Not it changing height or anything like that, just the angle that it subtends.
But my eye sees it as, say, 1 millimeter when that person is that far away. True?
No, not really. I mean, you can think about the angle that is, because everything you see when you look at things is like, because as you take a meter rule and you take it further and further and further away, right? The point I'm trying to make is the length of that ruler isn't actually changing. It's always 1 meter, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But what's changing is its apparent size to you, which is given by the angle.
Right.
Right, that's the key.
What I'm suggesting is that if I take a pencil and put my thumb at the point and drop it down, I will see that image of that person as, say, 1 millimeter. And
so here's the thing that I'll say to you that's like going to frustrate you a little bit. Depending upon where you hold that point, the angle is going to be different. Like if you hold it at arm's length versus right up against your eye, you know they're going to be different, yeah?
Oh, that'd be minimal, though, wouldn't it not?
Actually, no. If it's really close to your eye versus at arm's length, that's actually going to be quite a significant difference.
well, okay. I'm trying to do that as you say so.
Because it's all about the angle. It's all about the angle, right? Because what you're doing is you're changing the angle by moving something closer to you, right?
Right. So there must be a formula, though, that does that.
Yeah,
correct?
Absolutely. So literally, you can do the size of the object divided by the distance away. That will give you something that's called radians, right? And so we do that all the time.
Okay. Also, I think the human voice is allowed to carry about 180 meters, and you can still hear at that distance.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that the 1 millimeter when that comes, that will be far enough away that I wouldn't hear this person's voice at all. I'd like some peace from the south, and so I suggest that if I get him that far away, and he's beyond voice recognition,
I've got a technological solution. Turn the TV off.
Yeah, there you go.
Turn the radio off. Yeah.
After the show.
Thank you very much.
After the show.
Yeah, after the show.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, bud.
All right.
Okay, 902-405-6000. John, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, a couple of questions. About dark energy and dark matter, I've been reading two new explanations recently. One suggests that dark matter is matter that was left over from a previous universe that our universe is expanding into. And the other one suggests that dark energy is not real because our formulation of gravity is wrong. I think it supposedly doesn't obey a pure inverse square law or something like that.
Yeah, so, okay, how politically nice do I have to be on air, right? So I'm just going to be upfront with you. I don't put a lot of stock in either of these. The whole issue of where dark matter comes from is a challenge, but we have far simpler theories than dark matter being a representation of a very obtuse algebra situation that leads to one type of universe interacting with another universe and so on. So I'm really quite skeptical. Like you can do a lot of clever things with mathematics that give you the kind of formalism that you need to produce something that looks like dark matter. That's not too difficult to do. It's what we call a scalar field, right? And in that context, it's a self-gravitating scalar field. And in that context, there's plenty of clever things that you can do with different theories to come up with that. So interesting idea, but not something personally I spend too much time thinking about. Now, dark energy is actually, I think, a more interesting issue because it genuinely is a phenomenon that potentially does have a lot of different explanations, and there's no really simple version of any of them, right? Other than Einstein's cosmological constant, but even that has a lot of questions around it. So in this case, the idea that it may be manifested incorrectly in terms of our equations, because we do use an approximation to relativity most of the time when we do cosmology. And so all of that said, I've spoken to a few relativists about this particular theory, and none of them's particularly up on it, although off the top of my head, I can't remember what their precise arguments are. But interesting ideas, but not something that I would take too seriously personally.
Okay, thanks very much for your efforts. Thanks.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. Alexander, hello.
Hi, Todd. Hi, Dr. Thacker.
Hi there.
Dr. Thacker, quick question. I was reading an article on the vastness of space, which I again blame you and Todd for.
That's why it's called space.
That's right.
But in our little neck of the woods, we can see up to 2 trillion galaxies, and each galaxy has 3 or 4 billion stars. Is that correct?
That's probably reasonable. Remember, it's actually fairly difficult to do that calculation because it depends upon whether you're talking about the universe as it is now or the universe as we see it. All right, and those two things are actually different.
So how far can we see? Can we see we can't see to the edge, is that correct?
Well, funnily enough, by definition, you actually can see to the edge of the universe, right? Because it's what's called your horizon. right? So you can see back to the edge of your observable universe, right? That's literally how we define the horizon for a cosmology.
But is not the universe still expanding?
It is, but that actual position can change with time, right, of the horizon. So as the universe expands faster and faster, right, the horizon will actually get closer and closer to us.
Yeah, see, that's giving me a cramp.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a bit bizarre, but there we go.
Tell you true. And the second question, any guest speakers coming up at the university? Because I've enjoyed some of the lectures in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So literally on June 3rd, I mentioned it earlier in the program, but we're going to have Dr. J.J. Cavallars giving a public lecture about the solar system. And he'll probably talk about sort of like finding other planets out there at the outer edges and what we can do with the next generation of telescopes that are coming along.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Take care. 902-405-6000. By the way, I've received 2 or 3 emails on the ice caps changing, so I forwarded them to you, and perhaps you can peruse them over the break and weigh in on it when we come back. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay, give us a call, folks. We get some open lines for you. Rob Thacker to the top of the hour, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, we've got Rob Thacker of the Science Files, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. We have Rob to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well and some time for you also. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob, I forwarded you some of those emails.
Yeah, no. So it's one of those things. It's because I was thinking about the Arctic rather than Antarctica, and people have correctly pointed out that if you look at what's happening with Antarctica, because we've had a rise in precipitation there actually has been a little bit of growth of the ice cap there. But most people who are experts in this field seem to think it's going to be a temporary thing. Right. Yeah. And so there has been a small growth. But I mean, again, if you look at the Arctic itself, that is like we're heading towards basically no ice situations there.
Wow. Yeah. What type of time horizon are we talking?
Well, most people talk like it's decadal, right?
Is that right? Eh?
That's the kind of timelines, yeah.
So what are the ramifications of that?
Well, I mean, it's Arctic security.
Yeah.
Right? So the whole Northwest Passage thing, that's going to be a little bit of a mess, right? And then on top of that, the really sort of like concerning things are what happens in terms of the change in the energy absorption.
Yeah.
Right? Because once you lose all of that reflective ice cap, although I will point out, and I think this is important, that when you're at the pole, the actual impact of the energy that's getting is very low because it's coming at quite a shallow angle, right? So it'd be completely different if we had sort of like a band of white at the equator. That would have a huge impact in terms of reflecting energy, right? But there's going to be a lot of significant changes, and we're seeing some changes already with changes in the jet stream.
Yeah.
Right. So it's expecting there's going to be more of that.
But the Arctic at one point had a lot more ice than it did in our history, did it not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on going back to like hundreds of years ago, but certainly if you look at what's been plotted recently, it's been going down and down and down compared to the 70s.
Because it was once considered a land or an ice bridge connecting the two continents.
Yeah, and I mean, there still are going to be places where it does act as an ice bridge, right? So that goes without saying. But no, as we head, and there's always still going to be winter ice. I mean, that's inevitable because we get colder, right? And you don't get the sun for certain parts of the year up in the Arctic, and that's going to cool the temperature right there.
Okay, Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well.
Thanks for taking my call. I got a quick question. It's always bugged me. How have they ever determined how our Milky Way looks like when we're inside the Milky Way?
Yeah, and very, very reasonable question. So we can infer a fair amount about its overall structure by literally looking at how things are moving, right? And so we know, for example, there's at least a couple of strong spiral arm structures, and we can see that embedded within the data. You can literally look and see the density of stars and then see how they're moving. And so from that, you can then try and reverse engineer what that would look like from outside. Right? Obviously, we have no way of going outside the Milky Way and taking a picture of it looking back down. That's just not realistic. Can't do that. But you can infer its structure from how things are moving and what the overall density of stars is.
Okay, that sounds perfectly fine to me, I guess. Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, take care. He guesses.
Well,
he guesses
no.
okay.
I mean, it's like if you're inside something, that there are two things that you can do, right? You can look at what you see and then try and infer its distance. We can do that all the time in astronomy. That's one of the neat things called parallax measurements. We get to figure out how far away things are. Then you can infer how many things there are in a certain area, right? And then that gives you a way to sort of like piece together what things look like. What you got to remember is we have a pretty good idea of what the overall motion of the Milky Way is now. There's been a project called Gaia, which has measured the motions of hundreds of thousands of stars, right? And so we can use that to estimate how things are moving, admittedly in a local region, right? We can't sort of see through the center of the galaxy. There's just too much intervening stuff and so on, right? But we can see what's going on our side. And then logically, because we know spirals tend to be fairly symmetric, we can then infer pretty much what's happening on the other side as well.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Bobby, hello.
Good day, gentlemen. My question is, how much of an impact will... like a positive impact is global greening for climate change?
So there's a lot of different opinions on this, right? So very recently, people have started to point out that if you have the increase in the CO2 may lead to increased growth rates, but there's an issue there, right? And the issue that I've seen in papers recently is that if you look at growth rates are going to be tempered by high temperatures, right? So things don't grow well when they're getting too hot, right? So there is a limit to what's going to happen with them.
Okay, so like say the middle of the Earth, would be like drier, less things would grow, but then we would start growing up in the Arctic kind of thing, right?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you've got to have the right growing seasons and so on, right? I mean, certainly for us, you can imagine that it's not going to be terrible. But the main thing that I will point out, and that is unavoidable, is that we're going to have more and more extreme weather events. That does seem to be happening, right? And so there is the unavoidable fact. Ironically, I love grapes. I was talking about growing grapes with my partner on the prairies. And all it takes is one hailstorm, right? And boom, right? You destroy an awful lot of crop. Right, so that's what I think is the concern for me with food security over the next few years, extreme weather events.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. Got a bit of time for you. If somebody wants to sneak in a quick call, again, 902-405-6000. In the meantime, I saw this story. You sent it to me earlier. And being a cat guy...
Which one's he going to pick? It's the cats. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
I thought we'd have a little fun with this. Scientists tracked down a mutation that makes orange cats orange. What's this all about?
Yeah, so this is actually really quite cute. And so whether or not you like ginger cats. So it turns out that scientists had a pretty good idea of the fact that the particular gene mutation that causes ginger cats has to be something in the so-called X chromosome, because it's more likely to be seen in male cats, which are X and Y, and in female cats, which are XX. They would have to have both of the chromosomes with the same mutation to get a ginger cat, right? And so they've now tracked it down, and they've figured out what the mutation is, and it's associated with something neurological, which is kind of like why they were really had a struggle to figure it out in the first place. But it all fits, because now you can see why if you get just the ginger mutation in an XY, which will be the male cat, then you will get ginger. Now, with the female cats, if you get just one of them, and this won't be a surprise, people who keep cats will figure this out pretty well, then you're going to get tortoiseshell-like cats, right? So that tells you why there is a preponderance of female cats to be tortoiseshell. Right, which is a really, really neat little piece of research. I was kind of like blown away to read about it. Right, but it's just this particular gene that does it is not where they expected it to be. It's not common for other animals to have that particular mutation either. So it does seem to be something that's very specific to cats. And on top of that, it looks like it's been made more common by humans liking ginger cats and preferentially breeding ginger cats as well.
Are you a cat guy, Rob?
I like cats. I had a cat growing up. Don't have one now, but I do like cats. Sure.
Yeah, and if you were to have your druthers, would you have a ginger cat?
Probably not. I'd probably have a tortoiseshell or tabby cat because that's what I had growing up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob, listen, appreciate it very much. Always great, and we'll do it again next week, my friend.
Always a lot of fun. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
You got it. That's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files. And we do that each and every Tuesday. It's not Monday. It feels like it, but it's Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job, as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.